Pudgy Penguins has more followers on Giphy than Star Wars. I think what Doodles is doing with the animation studio they acquired. I mean, every frame of their high frame rate animations are gorgeous. CoolCats. It has the potential to really take a dent out of Hello Kitty's market share.
GM everyone, and welcome to Fuel for Thought, where we explore the multifaceted world of Web3 through the lenses of different industries and thought leaders. My guest today is a legend of IP building, someone that is very involved in the NFT space, very vocal as well, and followed by a lot of people who find his takes very, very insightful. So this is David Horvath. How are you doing, David?
How are you? Very happy to be here with you today, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is a great honor, and I've been following your content for a while now. It's always been extremely educational for me as a not an expert on IP building. And what is interesting is you have so much experience, but you have a very thorough understanding of what is happening in Web3. And we were discussing before recording this podcast, you even draw parallels between your experience in the toy industry with what is happening in Web3 today. So this will be a very interesting discussion. What I would like to start on is to elaborate a little bit on how you started in Web3. Like, what brought you to Web3? Because you have been building UglyDolls. That is your company, your baby, your story, your IP for 17 years, if I'm correct. So what brought you from the toy world and this IP into Web3?
Sure, of course. Thank you. Yeah, it's been 22 years now. It's hard to believe. I wish it were
Wow.
17. Yeah, Ugly Doll. We started 22 years ago. We had our very first character was Little Boney, a little skeleton character that we made up for Sony and NHK. It was an animated series on weekday morning TV for preschoolers in Japan. So that was our first adventure into the world of characters. And my wife Sunmin Kim and I, and she's really the real creator of Ugly Doll. I was the background help, But together we set out with this mission to create stories through lifestyle character brands, and stories through consumer products and books, and if by chance we thought it would fit, then maybe animated shows or movies, which we've been fortunate to be able to do both. Lots of books. So that's been publishing was a big focus of ours. And really, we're not even really in the toy business, even though we've made thousands of different toys and sold millions of each of them. We're not a toy company, and we've never really even been in the toy business. Although we've always had a booth at the International Toy Fair for the last 22 years, and sadly the last one just passed. The last New York Toy Fair. It's historical. I think it was 109th year or something. And then Little Boney, Ugly Doll, and then Bossy Bear, our children's book series that started with Disney, and then the new books are coming out May of next year, starting in May. And it's been on Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. here in the States since March, and has just recently launched everywhere else around the world, other than Japan. Might have to wait till next year or so. That was thank you. That was our life for the last 22 years, navigating the same realm as Hello Kitty more than He-Man, right? Going up against Miffy and Snoopy and trying to take that 0.001% market share from them. And then it was actually my entrance to Web3 was the guy who controls Sanrio for the USA called me. We were talking about something else, and he said, "Check out this website, Nifty Gateway." What's this? And I said, "Well, you know how you were telling me you always wanted to sell originals of your artwork, but you are a digital artist. So, you were complaining that that's not possible, and that your wife makes these beautiful paintings and sells them at galleries, and you always have to hang prints." Well, yeah. He said, "Well, now these kids are selling original works of digital art, and the collectors are collecting them the same way they would collect a painting in a gallery." and they're displaying them in a similar way also, and it's attracting attention from the real art world. And I thought, it's like an April Fool's joke or something. Like he made no sense to me. And then I fell down the same rabbit hole, we all did at some point, and immediately started minting my own work on OpenSea. And out of the millions of fans we had around the world at that moment, I was able to bring one over. I even went into the secret, deep Facebook groups where I know the most passionate of them hang out. And to this day, I've really only been able to bring one. I think there was one other one who stuck their toe in and decided it wasn't for them. One of them, a big fan of ours and good friend, has been super into our stuff for decades, is the only one who came over. So we sort of had to start from zero and attract an entire new audience. That audience kind of became a collector base, which then many of them became our close friends, and then here we are.
Amazing. So basically, it's a need that you had as a creator beforehand that was actually solved by the blockchain, and it's no wonder why art has been one of the most successful and relevant use cases for NFTs. It's because, well, it opens a whole new world of digital creations, collectability, ownership that we could not basically make happen before. So this is exactly why we're here today. And from an IP perspective, it's very interesting as well. You can monetize IP in new ways, and create communities and fandoms around your IP that were not possible before. So that is really exciting to me. And when we look at, let's say, the top 10, the top 20 projects, there are some examples that I think would be really interesting to look at during our discussion. And I know you have many more examples that I don't even know of that would be interesting to bring forward as well and highlight as a contrast to those very, let's say, mediatized IPs. So what I'd like to look at today as sort of a basis for discussion is Pudgy Penguins, Doodles, and Cool Cats. These are, for those of you who are listening to us that are not very familiar with Web3, these are very, very famous IPs that have come around in 2021 and that have really gathered a lot of momentum in the space. They have a huge followership. They have driven millions of dollars of volume in trading. And lately, the one that has been taking the crown, if we think in terms of monetary perspective and in terms of attention, has been Pudgy Penguins. So Pudgy Penguins, if we think about it, David, they've been playing a very, let's say, maybe I would qualify it as an aggressive development approach as compared to Doodles, for example, or CoolCats, in terms of having distribution deals and everything. Would you agree with that understanding of what they're doing, or would you define it differently?
Oh, I would definitely define it differently. I don't really see it as that aggressive. I see it as being the first time that maybe we can all gain some clarity on the different components of character culture and the character business. IP is an interesting term. I in general avoid it. I mean, technically, if my 10-year-old draws a new character on a piece of paper out there in the dining room table on the dining room table, look at that, and if he mails it to himself, it's IP, right? So that's true technically, but I think IP is a terminology that we should try to earn. That there are a lot of collections. There's so many collections that have great potential to become brands, right? And not brands because you say it is, but actual brands in the eyes of your future potential consumers, or tribe members, as I like to call them. I don't like to think of them as customers, really. But the IP terminology is funny to me, just because if you walk the licensing show, it's not a term that's really used. It might be like if you see an IP attorney, that's the one time you'll say that, as if you ask him if he is one, right? But yeah, I mean, technically anything you doodle and you print your own T-shirt, you can wear it just one. It's protected intellectual property, so that's true. But I do know that collections such as Doodles and Cool Cats and Pudgy Penguins are absolutely have broken away from the pack in the regards of those who are aware of what Web3 is, right? So if you look at the top 10 on OpenSea, those who are in this space and are aware of it and understand it, those have become sort of like what we call the blue chips, right? The same way in the designer toy movement from 20 years ago, we had our blue chips. We had Michael Lau and Pete Fowler. And if you don't know who they are, that's that's the challenge is in 20 years when I'm talking about Bored Apes and Beeple, will they understand them the same way I just said Pete Fowler and you may or may not have heard of them before, right? And then to what degree do you consider that to be huge, right? Because Frank Kozik, Pete Fowler, they're huge, right? Rest in peace, Frank Kozik. In that world for those people, right? And then the mission is how do you get the rest of the world to fall in love? So I think it's interesting to see Pudgy Penguins to look at it as a breakaway. Really, I look at it as just they entered a different business. So they are in the toy business. And if you're in the toy business, you thrive on a combination of play patterns and design. And it is 100% the right move to go into Walmart. Whereas if you're a brand like Bored Ape, there was a Bored Ape shirt at Walmart. And many were worried, oh, but we're a fashion brand and that's not a good look. It's like, well, it isn't a look. No one noticed. So you're safe, right? But they were right. If you're a lifestyle brand like Sanrio or a lifestyle character brand like Sanrio or Snoopy, or like at least what Snoopy is now, then right, entering Walmart would not be the best move. It maybe for a decade, maybe ever. It depends on what it is that you want to achieve. Whereas if you're a toy and you're going to be a toy brand, that kind of is the move. That's what Hasbro does, and that's what Mattel does, Spin Master, whether there's media behind it or not. They've entered the realm of the toy business, which is very different from the realm of, say, a Hello Kitty or a Snoopy, which is where I see Cool Cats and Doodles going. And I think they're, I don't want to say on equal footing, but I don't look at one being vastly more successful than the other at this point. They've just gone and complete, that's like shoe business, hardware store business, you know.
Okay, that is what you said is really interesting in the sense that you called me out on my biases. So the first one, or also my lack of education on when it comes to what IP means, probably because it's a buzzword in Web3 especially. It's a buzzword. Everybody talks about IP, and so I'm like, okay, IP equals brand, but not really. IP is basically, from what I understand from you, IP is anything that comes out of a human mind, and then the brand is more like the immaterial meaning that you have behind that IP that makes you want to engage with it, admire it, play with it, whatever form it takes. Because then, like, there's the brand, and then there's how it materializes, be it experiences like Doodles is doing, be it merch like CoolCats has also, be it toys like Pudgy Penguins. And so, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I guess I was referring to then when I was talking about the more aggressive expansion strategy, when you look at what Pudgy is doing versus Doodles, is really just more linked to how they materialize their brand into a product. And a product can be the game is to distribute it so that people can play with it and then enjoy the play pattern that it offers besides the character. Whereas what Doodles and CoolCats are doing is more trying to attach meaning to the characters that are behind. Is my reading correct?
Well, yeah, that's the correct thing to do in the business that they're in versus the business that Pudgy Penguins is in, right? So if you're starting a fashion doll toy and your competitor is Barbie, you don't put it into Parco in Shibuya where Doodles has gone, right? And if you want to, appeal to the people who are standing outside Shibuya Parco at, 9 a.m. on a Monday, you don't go to Walmart first, or maybe ever, right? So it would make sense to me that those are very different directions. And yeah, like let's say Doodles, for example, absolutely phenomenal. Great start. I hope that we see more of exactly that. You know, they had Crocs in the United States at a time when in small towns in the middle of nowhere, Crocs are suddenly becoming quite big again. And so they had that, but at the same time, they balanced it with having vinyl figures appear at a pretty critical store at Parco in Shibuya. I mean, Parco is one of the top four places that you go to if you want to appeal, especially to the surrounding markets. So it doesn't necessarily appeal to the locals in Japan, but it's a huge place of context for, I mean, literally you have hundreds of people waiting outside for them to open every day. Usually visitors from the surrounding territories, from Hong Kong and mainland China to Singapore, anyone who's into like the, they go there to experience what they think the Japanese cool kids are into. Whether or not the cool kids from Japan are actually aware of what's in there or not is a different discussion. But being there is the first of what we call culture microtransactions, right? If you want to go successfully go up against Hello Kitty, there's never going to be one big move like we've arrived. That just doesn't happen. Even Snoopy to this day has to execute on what we call culture microtransactions, and each of them on their own, you would look at that and say, "What's the big deal that you put 50 pieces of something in one shop? You're telling me that's going to change the world?" And the answer is 100% yes. In fact, putting 50 pieces on a small shelf in one little random shop, in general, is 50 to 50,000 times more powerful than putting 18 different consumer products on all 4,000 Walmart shelves. This is not a Pudgy Penguin Doodles dynamic. This is just the truth, right? That the mass market is not the best way to reach people. It's the best way to reach the people who already know about you, but it's not a tool that you use to inform or to grow from zero. Unless you're a toy, then it is the number one tool. Absolutely.
When you look at Pudgy Penguins, it's very interesting how they're doing things, and I admire them so much, especially on the um, content strategy side. They've been spectacular in growing their social media presence through content and also leveraging holder IP or holder characters in order to create content. So it's been like a real masterclass. It's been a masterclass in distribution as well, because in so little time they've been able to sell on Amazon, sell at Walmart in a very, I'd say, hard to get way for a young brand. But then they're also uh, looking to expand into more like clothing and this kind of products. So it seems to me that they're tapping into toys, and they're also tapping into more of a lifestyle area. Is this your reading as well? And then
No,
what do you
no,
no?
I don't think so. Well, I think that once a toy is phenomenally successful, then you can become what we call brand adjacent, where you can have T-shirts and you can have other backpacks and back to school stuff, and you can even have an animated show, right? And those things all you kind of thrive as if you are a Snoopy or a Pokemon or whatever it is, right? That those toy lines, like one example, like LOL Surprise is an example I always use from MGA, that um, they go in. It was a phenomenal hit. It was based originally on the play pattern of unboxing. That you literally had to unbox this thing, and they sent them to all the YouTubers, and where unboxing was a big deal for a little while, right, years ago. And then, right as their play pattern sort of wore out its welcome, they transitioned that line into a fashion doll line to go up against Barbie. So it was no longer the pattern of unboxing, and now it was the typical hair play, doll play. So successful that they were able to run full licensing programs around it, where there were T-shirts and there was shoes and apparel and beach towels and all that. So you once you reach a certain level of success, and I'm pulling for Pudgy Penguins that they'll be able to see that at some point, that if they really are actually successful on Amazon or Walmart, that then yeah, absolutely, they'd be able to move into apparel and video games, and sky's the limit, really. And
Mm.
if they're smart about it, it could last, well beyond the 3 to 7 years that you usually see with toy driven lines. It could, like Mattel's been, they're outlier cases, but Mattel's been very successful keeping Barbie alive for well beyond, and they've
You see my
seen
sweater, right? You saw my
what's
sweater. It's
yes,
it's merch from
yeah,
the Barbie movie, so you see it's pretty successful even amongst a segment that you would tend to think doesn't play with Barbie much
sure.
at
Well,
28 years old.
yeah, that's probably the purpose of the movie, right? To try to, because once you reach a certain point with these brands, you can make the attempt anyway. Many attempt, and some are successful at it, of literally leaving your place of birth, right? Like Barbie is a toy, and it kind of ebbs and flows, ups and downs are all based on its play pattern and its design mechanism. And Barbie has had many times when it was near crushed at a very low, and it's had times when it's been at a very high, and that's always thanks to a combination of the designers and having a sharp understanding of what the play patterns are, and then applying brilliant design to it. And that they've really captured the elven magic where they've been able to live for this long. At the same time, I also feel like the movie was definitely sort of like what the Mario movie, I think, was. It served as a way to break away from the kind of gravity of that toy line dynamic. I'm sure they're hoping to break away the way Snoopy did, right? Snoopy used to be a black and white comic in the newspaper for adults. Then it was a Christmas special for children. Then it was like a sort of had a lingering period where it was like a MetLife mascot, Hallmark store resident, and then Macy's plush doll thing that you just kind of always saw there, but it was just kind of there. And it was everybody's metal tin lunchbox for this during the 70s, etc. But they've completely left that place, right? There are still animated shows on Apple by design, but they are no longer where they've completely flown out of the nest, and now they are a lifestyle character brand taking on Hello Kitty. So you can survive for decades in some weird outlier cases. I mean, most massive hit toy lines run 3 to 7 years. That's a blessing, and as a toy company, you'll have the next whatever it is ready. Just Mattel and Hasbro and Spin Master always have, that it's sort of built in that these things last a certain amount of time, and the genius ones or you can purposefully have it go away and make it come back and all that. It's very fun.
Speaking of genius, you were referring to play patterns before when it comes to toys, and Pudgy Penguins is bringing in a new type of play pattern linked to blockchain that is basically you buy toys in store and then you can redeem digital collectibles that are going to enable you to customize your penguin in a digital environment. And it's something that we've seen quite trending amongst like top projects. When you think of Doodles, they have been experimenting a similar approach with Doodles 2. And so there's like this play pattern of having a box, be it or a product, a toy, and then opening it and then having digital collectibles that are randomly attributed to you, which reminds also of the Pokemon blisters that you would open when you were young. And so how impactful, how genius do you think these approaches are, and what do you think how to what extent do you think this will fuel the success of those brands, the Web3 native brands?
Well, of course, for Pudgy Penguins, I hope it works. I mean, just for the excitement of their community, you can feel it if you have any Pudgy Penguins fans on your timeline. It's a very positive, we say, vibe is what we're calling it, right? But that is you can't really orchestrate that. That's something that has to come naturally. So kudos to them for having that at all. It's brilliant. The design, no, it's not the play pattern of redemption, right? I think Webkins had that, where you buy a Webkins from Gans, I think was the company, and that was quite brilliant. Where you then take it over to your computer. It was the dial-up days, but some time ago. But I think there was a code you scratch away or something where then when you take your webkins to the computer and you type in your unique number, then your webkin lives in the browser, or some other thing happened, like beyond just having a toy and playing with it, that there was one more step. And that worked very well for them. So, the Web3 version of that, and I'm sure the Pudgy Penguins team has some other secret, extra thing on top of that around the corner. So I'm sure it'll do fantastically well. Um, no idea how they're doing on Amazon and Walmart yet. I think there's no way to know. Only they know that, as they get the buyer either showing them praise or otherwise. But I guess we'll all see as time goes. And for Doodles, I don't really associate play patterns with Doodles. Like, this is just my take, and I don't know. But like when I see the Doodles plush, it reminds me of the reason why Sanrio has plush, right? Half of Sanrio's revenues, which are massive, come from plush dolls. And yet they're not in the toy business. And they don't sell to kids. And there's zero play pattern, anything involved there, right? The reason why there is a Snoopy plush or Miffy plush or a Hello Kitty plush is an entirely different dynamic. It exists for an entirely other purpose, and it's reaching mostly 30 to 50-year-old women, right? Versus something that's in a toy store is literally for like age like 3 to 6, and then it used to be 3 to 11, but now the play pattern and any sort of play drops off so young now that it's like 6.5. They sort of move on to collecting, which also you can do with Pudgy Penguins. So they were very smart and wise to, add that redemption component to it. So I hope it works.
Yeah, it's really exciting so I haven't tried the Pudgy Penguins sort of reveal process of your digital collectibles, but Doodles is pretty exciting. Like every time you open one, it's the animations are on point, and it's really exciting. Really reminds me of Pokemon, and it's a feeling that I've really enjoyed when I was younger. So I'm happy to have it again with an IP that I resonate with. So we've talked about.
Doodles reminds me of you mentioned Pokemon. Doodles reminds me of what Pokemon is becoming now versus maybe what Pokemon was, the way you and I think of it being in the past. I mean, it still is technically cards and games, but I think like even in the last month, that's shrunk down from like 5% of their business to 4, which is pretty rapid. No, I don't know. I don't have access to the exact numbers, but they seem to be in a funny phase. Like, Snoopy went from being comic to Hello Kitty competitor. And in doing that, the audience completely changed. In fact, their audience changed twice. They went from adults to kids to adults again, right? Pokemon's when I hear Pokemon, I think of ceramics, mugs, and kitchenware, and oven mitts, and jewelry. What do I think of? Bags, lifestyle things for adults. That's when I hear Pokemon, that's what I think of, just coming from the world I come from. And I have to remind myself, oh, yeah. I mean, they still sell cards. Even in Japan, you go into like 7-Eleven, and every time there's a new card set, you see them by the register and all that. But they're in a transition where clearly they're, it's not going. I don't think it's gonna. There will probably always be Pokemon games, right? I don't know how big of just because everything else is just growing so massively. So I think Doodles is more like what Pokemon is now, versus from what they started as.
Mm-mm. So we've touched on products sort of with the Pudgy toys and then the Doodle plushes and the Doodles 2 and these type of products that they've been pushing for the last 2 years. We haven't really talked about content, and it seems to me, looking at those different Web3 native brands, that content is an important piece in building a brand and building your fandom and your community and having people really resonate with who you are and communicating who you are. When we see Pudgy Penguins, I did a short analysis on their growth in the past 2 years, and they have close to 1 million followers on Instagram. that probably for 99% of them don't even know it's an NFT brand and IP. It's basically they're just following the content and they resonate with it because it's very relatable videos. And then we have Doodles, which has taken a very strong lean towards content creation as well. They have acquired Golden Wolf, which is an animation studio, Emmy nominated, has worked with the best, I mean the most known brands throughout the world, Coca-Cola and everything. And so it seems that they're also playing big on content. So how important is content, be it video format or else, for building a brand?
Well, it depends on what you want to build, right? If you want to build a lifestyle character brand, then in the early stages, content and social media reach is actually probably should avoid it, right? Like especially social media reach, you like even Snoopy now has 17,000 followers on Japanese Twitter account, and I think 30,000 followers on Instagram. So you can see how it's just not. It's the attention economy when it comes to the business of lifestyle character products is not is it's irrelevant. And it's probably something that should mostly be avoided in general. Like there are some outliers like Kaori Hinata with her Morris, which is huge, right? That's bigger than, someday maybe Bored Apes can catch up to what Morris is, right? So if they do, they'll find that her Instagram is gorgeous, right? It doesn't really have a high follower count in relation to the millions of people around the world who collect her work, but it's a beautiful, she's using it as a real tool, as a supplemental tool at this point, now that she's 10 years in, where every single post is in the same color palettes that you would expect to find when you go look at Kaori's Morris. There's no banner ad or there's nothing that feels like it's broadcasting out towards you. This is the danger of social media in general for those who are interested in taking on, say, Hello Kitty versus being a toy. Is if you're into the lifestyle character business, the number one thing you have to avoid is broadcasting outwards towards people. You have to be a source of discovery. It almost has to be your fans' idea that you exist in the first place. So the most important thing is to be discovered in places that are already meaningful for people. That's above all else one of the most important factors for true growth. And that will take a very long time, obviously, because that has to happen thousands of times over a long period of time, just naturally. If you're in the story-driven business, like children's publishing or in animation, I think what Doodles is doing with the animation studio they acquired. I mean, every frame of their high frame rate animations are gorgeous, right? They're really well done. So I have no idea what they're doing with it or, what the plan is, but I can picture that being quite well received, of course, right? The no-brainer. And then the social media stuff, yeah, if you're a toy line, social media probably comes second to, I mean, TV advertising is still the killer for toys. Even now, you wouldn't think so, but broadcast is still pretty important. Social media, I don't know, maybe for parents,
Mm.
to reach, but for the core consumer, I guess the core, yeah, I don't know, maybe for parents. I noticed that when I searched, I didn't even know what Giphy really was. I thought animated GIFs were just there on iPhone and, funny stuff that Pusheen does on Tumblr. So I heard about Giphy and I searched for our own brand on Giphy, and everything was Pudgy Penguins. So I thought, oh, I got confused. I thought, I see. So Giphy is Pudgy Penguins thing. And so, but then I scrolled down and then, there's our animated GIFs under there. Then I realized, oh no, this is like a weird bug or something. I thought it's because of because I'm in Web3, they're studying my search results or something. I don't really search for Pudgy Penguins. So I called Giphy, I do this, but email, and I said, hey, the search result for my brand is penguin pictures, and then they fixed it like in an hour. It was great. And now I'm very well aware of what Giphy is. Pudgy Penguins has more followers on Giphy than Star Wars does, I think. I think they have more
So
followers than we have humans on the Earth, which is pretty remarkable.
exactly. exactly. I
I mean,
actually looked up the
it's
number because I was stuck on 7 billion something, but that was probably passed over
rich
many years
people.
ago, and now we're 8.1 billion people on Earth, and
So if
Pudgy
you track
Penguins have.
internet access, that means that each of us, well, I wonder what counts as a view. Is it a view? Is it views or is it followers? I don't really know.
Yeah, it's views. They have 8.3 billion views as far as I know. And so that's more than we have people on Earth. And I would assume, so I'm just guessing here, but I would assume that the viewership is counted on like the reach, sort of like how many people have seen your GIF. And so the more people share it, the more people view it, and therefore they get a lot of views.
Well, I
But
was
yeah,
happy to contribute to maybe 50 views. People who search for Ugly Dolls on Giphy saw them. I think Doodles had the same thing. When you search for Doodles on Giphy, it was all Pudgy Penguins. I don't know about now, but at
yeah, I
some
don't know
point.
about now. But I know Doodles has like much lower viewership than Pudgy Penguin does. So that's really also I think the expertise of
That's probably what
Lucanets.
they want. No, if
Mm-mm.
I were Doodles, I'd probably want a lower number and not a higher number at this point.
Yeah, so you're a strong believer in starting small and making like small meaningful steps into building a lifestyle brand, right? Why is that? Why do you think that? Why do you think that if you have a brand that you want to build into a lifestyle brand, why is it not good to, I don't know, be mentioned on Jimmy Fallon's show like Bored Apes were back in the days, like because it's broadcast the brand to many people. So why do you think this is probably not the
Very
good approach?
interesting. That's what you definitely don't want. Is broadcast at many people is exactly the wrong approach, in my opinion.
Mm,
Um, you know, yeah, in general, those don't really do anything anyway, so it's okay. It's safe. No harm was done, I believe, by Jimmy Fallon mentioning them. But yeah, in this space, there's a view of big things and huge and dude, that's huge and let's fucking go and all this stuff. That's wonderful. I understand how romantic it is that you're just sitting there in a room, and then the next minute Nike is aware of you as a person is a weird it's a weird feeling for anyone to have, right? Yeah, very bizarre. Or even to be adjacent to that, like, oh, I'm in Web3, which is this tiny little thing, and I'm collecting this thing, and now these major brands are interested in what I already knew about. It's a very romantic thing to happen. I totally get it. We saw the same thing happen with the designer toy movement 20 years ago, where you're just a little creator in a room and you're making little sculptures and you're putting them out to a couple hundred fans or a couple thousand fans or whatever. And all of a sudden, there's Disney executives coming to your booth and Nickelodeon people and Nike came. And the exact same thing happened to the blue chips of the designer toy movement. And it happened in kind of the exact same way. Uh, in fact, it was sort of like responsible for the downfall of most of those in the designer toy movement 20 years ago. Um, you can't imagine how huge we thought all these creators were, right? And they were so focused and bringing us a world to the degree where I thought maybe the actual toy business would just be flipped or changed the way taxis to Uber. I thought this is going to be a massive impact on the toy business. And what happened was everyone from Nike came and everyone from Reebok and Adidas and Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney came and gave everybody development deals, Paramount Picture movie deals, and suddenly the Nike logo was on this little thing that we thought was so small, and this is going to be huge. This is going to bring everybody. And what it ended up doing in our world was it got those creators very distracted. Whereas before they were so focused on creating the next something, right? Not the next Disney, but like the new thing that everybody would turn their attention towards. And it started to work. And then people started to, it takes all your waking hours to work on a development show for like if you get a development deal with Universal or whatever. That's every waking second of every day for the next many years. And most development deals don't result in a show, getting picked up or greenlit or anything. So it's a big risk, right? I think that just many weren't aware of that dynamic and mostly went away. And then Funko picked up the ball. Kid Robot did pretty well. Um, Super 7 ended up doing fantastically well 20 years later once they entered the realm of licensing. But Funko grabbed that ball that everybody took their eye off and went, as you know, just around the world with it. And then Pop Mart took that and then went 2 times Mattel's market cap. So the blue chips and those that are at the top 10 of the charts in the beginning stages are not always the ones that end up being the ones that tell the world and get the rest of the world to fall in love with it. It's not always the same group of people. And so that hasn't happened yet here, but it could be interesting. I mean, there are people who are at the bottom 50 on OpenSea. They're technically from Web3. I think I mentioned him when we first started talking. Duckhead. Duckhead is bigger than Bored Apes, and yet most people in Web3 are like, Duckhead, what is this guy on, man? What have you? And I don't even know how to get that stuff, so I'm on nothing. But Duckhead is huge, right? When Duckhead shows up at a real life event, he's got more people waiting for him outside from the Taipei Toy Festival in Taiwan to he just went to the Singapore show. He shows up with like his little stuff and monster reaction, right? So I don't know. I think all his stuff is sold out, but it's not trading at some interesting billion-dollar volume. So it's not connected to what we think of when we think of trading and all this. But for those who are listening, who are sitting at the bottom 100 of OpenSea, those top 100 should be commended, and it's amazing. It's what drives all of this. But don't feel discouraged is what I guess my advice would be, because you're really on equal footing. And that's putting it nicely, really. Like the top 10 on OpenSea, bottom 50 OpenSea, to me, it's level playing field, and you have just as much of a chance at success as any of these others. And I 100% mean it based on my own experience, and I'm sure I'll be proven wrong by somebody, but that's the message that I really like putting out for anyone who's listening, as most who are listening are probably starting from zero, right? That don't feel discouraged by any sort of perceived success that you see in our space. It's too new. We're all in it together, and we're all pretty much equal.
Yeah, and comeback stories or projects popping out of nowhere, you would think nowhere if you just pay attention to the top 10 is not unheard of. And
Sure.
equally, projects that are at the top of the attention game and that fall from grace also are not unheard of. I know that CoolCats has had rough times early 2022, mid 2022, as far as I recall, where they launched this Cooltopia game, I think it was called, or like they launched a game, and it sort of was in dissonance, as far as I understand, with the IP and what holders believed that CoolCats was aiming towards. Like they went for a game that was not really building an IP. It was just like more of a blockchain based game with a token, and I think it really broke that trust with holders. So now they're trying to like go a different path and rebuild the brand that they had started to grow in Web3. If you had to give an advice to CoolCats, or if CoolCats was yours, how would you steer it in a way where 10 years from now or 5 years from now, it would stand maybe not at the top of the OpenSea chart, but at least it would be a worldwide brand, basically?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't really see anything that CoolCats has done as any sort of misstep. It might be perceived as such from the founders, like, oh, we really wanted this to happen and this didn't work out, but that's a very normal part. Like if I told you the first 3 years of our own journey, it's mostly missteps and mishaps and getting things wrong because you're not aware of anything. And on one hand, that's an advantage because you're also not afraid of things, and you're not listening to old people like me showing up at your booth like that's not the way things are done, and you're really going to mess up. And actually, I remember them coming to us and saying that, but I had no idea what they were talking about, so I couldn't be afraid of it because I was like, "What did you say?" So, I don't know. What do you say? I don't know. So, CoolCats is like that. They just started. I think that if you look at the overall brand in general, and then the creator behind it, and the team behind it, yeah, they have the potential to be. It's terrible to say the next Hello Kitty because they don't want to be the next anything. They want to be the first Cool Cats, right? But it's up to them whether they want to go the Hello Kitty direction, meaning lifestyle character brands, or if they want to go story driven like Dogman or Captain Underpants or something episodic like SpongeBob, or whatever they choose to do. I'm sure they'll do phenomenally well. If it were mine, I would make it a lifestyle character brand, and I have no idea what their actual plan is. I Penguins, Cool Cats, Doodles. I have no clue what this may have even been discussed in their communities. I'm so limited to the amount of hours I have to look up at the screen and keep up with everything. But if it were mine, it has the potential to really take a dent out of Hello Kitty's market share for sure. That I would focus on, and I think they've done a very good job at this, on not broadcasting outwards, not chasing awareness, chasing eyeballs, because those things work in the short term, and that's the problem, is that you do get attention, and it does generate hype and awareness, and it does even bring dollars, and that can be misunderstood as success markers, and it kind of puts you on a shorter lifespan path in general. If you're a lifestyle brand in general, there's always outliers, and there's always cases where it wasn't true. But because what happens is, even though the audience may love it, like, oh my god, so adorable, your subconscious is understanding it differently, right? It's something that's like, we know when we're being sold. It's just in our subconscious now. Like, advertising in the 50s on TV didn't roll off the same way it rolls on us now, because it was new. And then by the 80s you had to be funny, then by the 90s you had to be on the Super Bowl, and now you don't even see it. Like, I can't remember the last time I saw any advertising, and yet it's broadcast at me all day. Now, when I walk outside in Japan as a tourist, I remember 20 years ago, oh wow, it's overload, look at all there is to see. And now I don't notice anything. And so I can imagine someone who's been born there. When you walk outside and the building is singing to you, and there's the giant Shibuya screen, and then the bus has a character, the toilet has a character, the bank has a character, you don't notice any of that stuff. And so that's the noise. And so the reason why I suggest young creators is watch out for chasing eyeballs and awareness and views, is because yes, you get that, but then you're associated subconsciously with the noise. In my brain is going to doom scroll you, even in real life eventually. Like, there's no way. Once you're associated with the noise, you just are. Versus if I walk into, if I'm in Japan and just, I'm on the train, I'm after work, and I don't see any of this stuff. The guy next to me's got the most amazing game. I just don't see any of it. But then I go to, like, my place, right? There's a store there called Loft, and that's like my place, man. That's my stomping ground. This place gets me, and I walk in there, and right away I'll feel better, and I feel like, yeah, this place is me, right? For my wife, it's the MoMA design store, right? For our neighbor, it's the local comic book shop. But everyone has their place, right? And that place doesn't have to be a physical place. It can be music, it can be a certain creator or whatever, right? Maybe it's a museum, right? Maybe it's an actual museum. The Dallas, like 2 hours from here, there's the Dallas Art Museum, and they have a beautiful store in there, right? You walk in there, you feel differently walking into your place than you do if you walk through a Costco or a Walmart. So when I walk into this Loft store, or when my wife walks into the MoMA shop, she sees things there and interprets them differently, right? Because she cares about that place. Like, readers of the Giant Robot magazine walk into the Giant Robot store, and they love that place. It's like their place, and they have a feeling about it. So they assign that feeling to that which they discover there, right? If I walk into Giant Robot and oh, dude, look at this Takashi Murakami plush doll. It's but what's this? What's this right next to the Takashi Murakami plush doll? What is this thing? Now, this thing, I might have walked right past this thing 1,000 times before in other places, but because I care about this place, subconsciously, It's my place. That I'm assigning that feeling to that which I find there. And that's what I would recommend Cool Cats does, is to be a source of discovery for people. Make
Mm.
it their idea. Because when people find you and they fall in love with you, they tell everybody. They tell everybody. And hearing it from your best friend, dude, look at this, is a lot different than clever advertising where you're able to figure out, no matter how adorable, you're still associated with the noise, especially at this stage. So that's what I would recommend. And Cool Cats will do whatever they want; they'll still be fine.
Question for you. So you said before that Cool Cats, from as far as you know, hasn't been broadcasting their brand to a like large audience in the way that a Jimmy Fallon show would. One of the upcoming events in the Cool Cats ecosystem is that they'll be at the Macy's parade. So I've never lived in the US, so I don't know the full extent of what this is. But would you consider that this is a broadcasting event, or would you consider that this is more of a, being next to Takashi Murakami event where you're like in the Macy's
Sure.
environment, and so therefore people perceive you in a certain way?
Yeah, there are some things that I would consider a cultural microtransaction, and even being a balloon in the Macy's parade is one of those cultural microtransactions. It's not really a clever place to get attention. I actually don't think that that event is going to bring awareness, but I think it's a very wise. It's one of thousands of necessary steps that I hope they take. That I'm sure that they're way beyond what I'm talking about when it comes to what's after that. But that there are some things that are quite mainstream that are very safe and function as those non-broadcast events, like the Macy's parade, or being a Pez dispenser, or you know I'm trying to think of something as huge as possible, like a Lego collaboration, right? It does, even if that's massive, and romantically that feels massive, but I'm talking about how the actual general public perceives it, right? Um, but if they follow up the like we when we first started with Ugly Doll, one of the first things we did in Japan is we did a massive Coca-Cola collaboration where every single bottle of Coca-Cola had our character on the bottle cap, and it was in every single convenience store. Right, that was the first thing we did there. So when it was and it sold out. So Coca-Cola said, "Oh, we would like to run it again and expand it and add more characters," and we said, "No, no, absolutely not." And then everything we did from that point on were thousands of little tiny things. And that one was safe in Japan because no one knew who we were. And that didn't cause anyone to know what we were at all. In fact, it served its purpose by 10 years later, people in Japan who now know us look back and go, what? You did that when? And they look it up. It's something that they can look up in the past. That's very powerful also. To have things that serve as that are useful to you in the past is critical. So really the reason why we did the Japan thing with Coca-Cola was for our established fan base in America, that we had already had 6 years of a growing fan base, through these little culture microtransactions. So that, being in Japan on every Coca-Cola bottle as a little toy, and you're this thing, you're not Star Wars, because Star Wars was doing Pepsi bottles, right? So there's a weird association. Wait a minute, Star Wars on Pepsi and this little thing that I like on Coke at the same time. Like there's that, right? But that was for kids in the US. That was the purpose, right? So as long as everything's done with a very specific purpose where it's not a broadcast outwards, but something that serves as some sort of discovery. Like they found that and their jaws dropped. They were freaked out, right? These days it's like you do something big and then next week they want to know what else you got going on. That resonated for for at least a few months, and we had something else coming right afterwards that had already been planned also, and after that, and after that, and so there will never be one thing that puts you on. There will never be one event like Jimmy Fallon or whatever we perceive to be huge. Those things are not huge.
Hmm.
They're to be like, for the community, it's huge because it's something to celebrate for sure. But we always say here at home, uh, become one with culture. Don't market to it. There's a huge difference. Now, if you got a hardware store down the street and you're looking for customers to come in, that's different. You put some Facebook ads, and that's the attention economy. But in the character realm, the attention economy is sort of incompatible with with especially in the early stages.
Hmm. You were mentioning before, the how the space behaves towards events. For example, Bored Apes on Jimmy Fallon. Everybody was like, "Wow, this is crazy!" And there was chatter of, "Okay, we're gonna like go to the moon because everybody in the U.S. is gonna want to buy a Bored Ape if they have the savings. Like this is huge and everything." And then, of course, nothing happened because it was nothing happened. Of course,
Nothing,
the
right?
floor went up because people were speculating on the floor going up, but like it was not a major event in the sense of everybody then wanting to own a Bored Ape, like the event indicated. And so the question I have to you is, if you're a brand in the making, born from Web3, right? And you probably have 10 years, 15 years of sustained efforts in order to make it to this like globally acclaimed and a brand with emotional attachment from a huge fan base that is going to
Mm.
hopefully trace back to the NFT collection that started it all. How do you
Yes.
keep your Web3 audience, which has their own expectations of what should be happening and how value should retrace back to them? How do you keep them engaged and happy? How do you do that?
Sure. So we had our holders 20 years ago, the core Ugly Doll fans, and they were not just casual consumers who picked a couple up and had them, and maybe you had our shirt in a bag or something, but they were really in it, and they reminded me of holders. And is there a financial commitment? I mean, they put their time in, and that's the biggest financial commitment of all. So for every time we had something happening, whatever we were doing, like where we made most of our money in the first 5 years was in museum stores, right? There are as many museum stores in America as there are Walmarts. So you can be as big as someone who goes big in Walmart without ever having to go to Walmart. It's just a lot more work because instead of one buyer, there's 4,000 buyers. But you can, while we were doing that, or anytime we did you know, the things that ran the business were the big stuff, right? But we always had a Ugly Con every year. Ugly Con was like a Ugly Doll fan convention, but it wasn't a convention, it was like an art show. And for the first couple of years, we did it in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York, Tokyo and Seoul. And it would be our own work. And we'd do special dolls, and I'd make special drawings and prints and paintings and T-shirts, and we'd make special things that you could get if you knew about that. And these were like the real early adopter super fans would go to. And there was like maybe a couple of thousand total around the world of them versus the millions of people who are buying our consumer products on a daily basis, or every year. So then after that, we transitioned to where, well, instead of us doing the work, we invited the top creators in the general, toy and designer space. Like, we would get Yukinari Dahara from Japan, or Duckhead, like I told you, from South Korea. And the theme would be just Ice Bat, this little blue guy, if you're watching the video over my shoulder. But we have a character, Ice Bat, is one of the top 3 selling for the last 20 years. And so the theme was Ice Bat. So every major artist, like we had the creator of Gloomy Bear send one. We had a children's book illustrator send one, so like the tribe leaders of each of their worlds, right, sending in their version of Ice Bat. So everyone showed up to see that, right, just to do something for those, to appreciate those who have been in it with you from the get-go. If you're talking about floor prices and all that, I don't know how that's going to go long term. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just don't know. I mean, is this the equivalent of having bought the first issue of Ninja Turtles back in the late 80s or early 90s, and then like are is this the equivalent of having collected the first 12 Star Wars action figures when the movie first came out and you held on to them and you're hoping for the value to go up? Um, you know, we have a series of 30 Bossy Bear NFTs. There's only 30 of them. and no one wants to sell them. They're all gone. And when our show came out, the floor price didn't really move. In fact, no one knows about them, right? So I guess that's why they didn't move. But I have a hard time connecting success in the real world with somehow impacting, like, I don't know if the answer to this one, but did the Marvel movies impact the prices on older Marvel comics? Right? Maybe they did. Probably. Like, did the Batman? I think the first Batman movie in the '80s did cause that Batman Detective Comics number 27 to jump up from whatever it was. Maybe, right? But are those original holders of Action Comics number 1 and Amazing Fantasy number whatever it was, Spider-Man's first appearance, right? Do they benefit from Thor: Love and Thunder? I don't know. That's a tricky question. I can't get. You would have to know the future of Web3 in general to be able to guess how that plays out, which I, of course, do
Yep.
not. I'm just a guy with some plush animals.
The interesting thing with NFTs is that beyond, well, at least in the case of Doodles, Pudgy Penguins, CoolCats, it's not only a collectible art piece that marks a part of history of the brand, the origin that started it all. It's also an access pass to things. At least the brand has attached utility to it for holders. So, in that sense, as the brand grows, you would assume that the benefits of holding the original token are going to expand and bring you more value, or like at least connection to the brand. And in that sense, it could grow in value as more fans join the ecosystem of the brand. That's the thesis that I have, at least regarding my collectibles.
I hope it works that way. I mean, I do hope that the art component of it is taken more seriously over time and warms the hearts of more people. So that I want Web3 in general to succeed, especially for that to, for digital artists to be as, for their work to be as valid, to be able to offer an original as someone who offers a painting. I understand that you
Mm-hmm.
can never physically touch it, but for those who are interested in doing so, can collect what the creator deems to be the original, right? So that's fascinating to me. In the collector space, I'm very interested to see. I have no way of guessing how it's going to play out. I hope it plays out in some very positive way where those who were here in the first, few years get get to see everything play out the way they're hoping it will.
Yep.
I would just warn those in general. You know, there's the existing collector base is one thing, and then there are people who are really putting like a future down payment on a house, or at least a car payment on the line, and the I, well, the example I like to use in general as a cautionary tale for those who this could, in case it's going to financially wreck someone, is like our TV show got on Nickelodeon in March, and Nick Jr. both, and we broke the 2019 premiere record previously held by Ryan's Toys Review, which was like the number 3 YouTuber of all time, right under Mr. Beast and T Series or whatever, and then Ryan's, and then so if we had a 10K collection, they might say this is huge, right? But go to Walmart or Target right now, go to any whatever the big store is in each country, go there. There's no toys, right? We've been huge ratings since March, and there's not going to be any toys or merch or T-shirts this Christmas, and there's not going to be any toys, T-shirts, or merch next Christmas either. The only one thing that is coming out by design is our books start hitting in May, and that's the, in my opinion, just for me, the right way to do this, because I want it to live forever. And I don't, the show sort of is a supplemental part of a whole, right? But I totally understand an art student coming out of like the Otis School of Design in California, if they get called into Cartoon Network and their show gets greenlit, that's romantically the biggest thing in the world, right? And so they're thinking immediately, oh, this is going to be huge. It's going to be like toys right next to Paw Patrol. And that can happen, but it's not necessarily always the best thing. And I still don't understand the correlation between rise in price and those things occurring in the real world, other than I understand the romantic nature of that happening at all. It's pretty remarkable. Think about it, that these things on OpenSea got the attention of Nike. All I'll say is that's Nike's job, right? Like whenever something breaks through that attention membrane, it's their job to seize it and contact them and work with them right away, because they have to show their holders, their fans, their base, that they are still the number one cool brand, that they're aware of the cool small stuff right when you are, right? So they have to work with you. Michael Lau was our Beeple. Michael Lau was the king of the designer toy movement out of Hong Kong, and Nike contacted him right away. Cozy and Dan was the blue chips, Bored Apes of the giant robot generation, right? In fact, Bored Apes has yet to catch up to where they were. It will happen, but they're not quite there yet. They got approached by, I don't know, some big sneaker company. Did that put them on where you know who I'm talking about, right? So I think I would rather focus on Web3 becoming its own thing, the way Uber did not worry about getting attention from taxi companies. Oh my God, I got a call from Bell Cab, right? No, you're Uber, man. Be Uber, right? SpaceX is not going to stop making rockets because Mattel called and they want to make Hot Wheels. That sometimes it feels like that to me, that we're in this little thing that could become life-changing and world-changing. So who cares if CAA called you? That's those old guys do that stuff. Why don't we make the thing that doesn't require a CAA anymore? Right? That's Web 2, Web 3. I don't really think of there. Personally, I don't think there's such thing. I think that this is just beautiful, amazing new technology that we'll figure out. Like the comic book era was not publishing two. It was just a new form of publishing and a new form of creative expression that led to what we have now, right? From the 30s to the 90s. It took a while, but it led to, if you're happy with whatever's out there, the Marvel movies, or, half of the world being in love with all of these characters, right? After pretty dark, rough periods. So I don't know if it's Web 2, Web 3. I think it's its own thing. And I hope that the rest of the world falls in love with it.
Well, David, thank you so much for all your insightful takes. What we can take away is at least some very insightful advice on how to build a brand from your experience and looking at different angles. As a community, I think I can speak from the whole NFT community here by saying that we're really glad you're here, because, you provide the perspectives we need to understand what's happening in front of our eyes and that we're participating in every day. And which passionates us like to the most deepest level. So thank you. Guys, for those of you who listened to this episode and got to the end, congrats. Thank you for your interest. Please hit that notification bell and that subscribe button so that you are aware of everything that's coming up, because I have some cool stuff brewing. And David, again, thank you so much. And I hope I see you again soon.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.